Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Blazer Metrics Podcast. I am Nate Bishop. I'm joined once again by Larry, aka TB Pup. Welcome back, Larry.
Good to be here,
And
wherever here is.
yeah, exactly. The lovely Oregon coast, perhaps, or is it a different coast?
Now, Oregon coast.
There you go. I bet it's beautiful down there right now.
It is stunning.
Um, we decided to hop on this afternoon because news just broke about a memo that the NBA sent out to all of their teams regarding the Damian Lillard situation. So what we want to do is read the memo to you really quickly, and then also read a couple of different tweets that have come out in response to that, and then finally get into how this memo could potentially impact Dame's trade value. I mean, what might go on behind the scenes from this. So, just really quickly, I'll go ahead and read this memo. The full memo was provided by Chris Haynes, which is kind of ironic. I think it's kind of
A little bit.
I think it's a little bit hilarious, but the memo states recent media reports stated that Damian Lillard's agent Aaron Goodwin called multiple NBA teams to warn them against trading for Lillard because Lillard's only desired trade destination is Miami. Goodwin also made public comments indicating that Lillard would not fully perform the services called for under his player contract if traded to another team. We interviewed Goodwin and Lillard and also spoke with several NBA teams to whom Goodwin spoke. Goodwin denied stating or indicating to any team that Lillard would refuse to play for them. Haha. Goodwin and Lillard affirmed to us, this is important, that Lillard would fully perform the services called for under his player contract in any trade scenario. The relevant teams provided descriptions of their communications with Goodwin that were mostly, though not entirely, consistent with Goodwin's statements to us. We have advised Goodwin and Lillard that any future comments made privately to teams or publicly suggesting Lillard will not fully perform the services called for under his player contract in the event of a trade will subject Lillard to discipline by the NBA. We also have advised the Players Association that any similar comments by players or their agents will be subject to discipline going forward. Wow. There's a lot going on in that memo.
And you're right that it's Haynes that's reporting this is a bit hilariously ironic. Um, Now, some of this we had said was BS from the beginning that Dame would not report. That had come out in multiple different places. And then a lot of places picked it up as well. It wasn't that they were reporting it, they were reporting that it had been reported. And we kind of called BS on this from the start. That's not what Dame has been like. You're not going to take an ultimate NBA professional and all of a sudden not show up. I didn't buy that. I think there's a lot of people that didn't buy that, but a lot of people reported it. As much as I am not a fan of Kendrick Perkins, he had been on the side of he did not believe that that would be true, while a lot of his cohorts were ranting and raving about how Dame would only go somewhere. So that's number one, that we didn't think that that was the case, but it was being reported. And there's something in there that says Goodwin conversations with Goodwin were mostly, though not entirely, consistent with Goodwin's statement.
Yep.
So that leads you to believe that perhaps there were. I mean, he had said to Barry Jackson that he was calling teams. Now, what would he be calling them for? If they'd said, well, it was my understanding that he was trying to work out a trade with Miami and calling other teams to get to see if they would help Miami.
Um,
Not that he was trying to get other teams to acquire Dame. So I'm not sure why he would be calling other teams anyhow. as the agent. I mean, he's, the GMs take care of that. So why would he be calling teams unless he was calling them to say, hey, don't take my player? Because the only other option would be calling to say, okay, do take my player. Well, why would he need to do that? I mean, it should be an open market. And then the last thing is basically naming James Harden without naming James Harden. Any similar comments by players or their agents subject to discipline going forward, because Harden is not nearly as vociferously coming out of his camp, but indicated that he wants to go only to the Clippers. Yeah, there is a lot in here.
So I would have to try to go dig up the tweets, but if I remember correctly, the reports that came out, and I don't think that Goodwin has ever publicly gotten in front of a camera or a microphone,
And he's done the very same thing Dame has done. Dame has, there's been stuff said, and then Dame comes out on Twitter and said, "Well, what did I say?" Well,
yeah,
technically, you're right, you didn't. It was all the Dame whisperer, Chris Haynes or Aaron Fentress, or it was those guys carrying the water. Yes, Dame never went on record, and I'm sure Aaron Goodwin didn't either, which is why they call these.
He did though. He did. He never. So we don't have a recording of him, but that Miami reporter Barry Jackson quoted Goodwin, and I'd have to go back and try to find it, but
now, the quote was that he had talked to other teams, not necessarily that he had talked to teams saying, don't trade for Dame. And then he said, some other things that were, that certainly made it seem like that fit in with the don't trade for Dame because this is the only place he wants to play. But I think he was real careful to not state that is exactly what he had done. Everything that I had read that I've gone back over, he stopped short of doing that.
The reports that I had heard, and this has been going on for weeks now, so I'd have to try to go back and find them, but that essentially Goodwin had called some teams and some teams had called him, and he had said that his client would be unhappy if they were to trade for him or
Correct.
If he were to go anywhere other than Miami. They never came out and said he won't play for you or he won't, he'll sit out. Those reports came, I want to say Fentress. I know that Haynes has leaked a few things. He scoffed at the idea of Boston, before the draft. But I'm pretty sure it was Fentress. So, obviously take that with a grain of salt. But the two things that really stood out to me in that memo, number one, Goodwin and Lillard affirmed to us that Lillard would fully perform the services called for under his player contract in any trade scenario. Well, first of all, what does that mean? That they're going to perform the services, like show up, I want it to mean that he would just happily accept a trade, but the legalese of it doesn't necessarily say that. Right. So,
and it's excuse me, it still goes back, even when they said, Dame would not be happy, but that's not saying he would not report or don't trade for him. So they treaded around some gray area lines, trying to, as we talked about before, trying to depress the trade market because Miami doesn't have enough on their own. So, and I'm not sure how they even get enough. I mean, I'm still waiting to see the monster groundswell of teams wanting to give up much for Tyler Hero. As great as many Heat fans think he is, there hasn't been a big long line for him. So Miami still does not have a very good package, and this was the only way that they could get him there was to try and depress that. And finally, Adam Silver stood up and did what he really should have done quite some time ago, because this is in the CBA, and so starting July 1, this was in there. So he finally comes out, says that, and now whether other teams that they open the wallet and go, okay, we would be interested. I don't know.
Yeah, so somebody, I was reading through the post on Reddit, and the quote that Goodwin gave to what is it, Barry Jackson or whatever.
Yeah.
Some teams I did call, other teams have called me. It's a respectful relationship with most teams. Truthfully, he wants to play in Miami. Period. So yeah, I think, and I can't remember who reported that essentially they were telling these teams that he would be unhappy if he played there. I'd have to try to go. This stuff all came out weeks ago, so you'd have to try to go dig it all up. But I think all of the he won't show up, he'd sit out. That smoke all came from other reporters that weren't citing any sources. It was just kind of this. This is what.
They were re-reporting what had either come out from Haynes or Fentress, because there was a Miami Miami podcast. They were going nuts over a report that Fentress had about how he would only go there, wouldn't be happy, whatever he was doing, and so they were just reporting on that, and they were giddy. I mean, I guess I would be too if some superstar said this is the only place I want to go. But again, it was a lot of commentary based on a couple of people, mostly here. I don't remember anyone. Maybe Shams, on Shams's side, they had mentioned he had carried a little of that water as well, because Shams is more agent oriented. Um, but there's been so many of these, and so many people retweeted stuff or commented on what was said. I forget who said it first, but there's obviously been tons of stuff out there. That's all that's been talked about for weeks.
Yeah. So, and then the other part is we've advised Goodwin and Lillard that any future comments made privately to teams or publicly suggesting Lillard will not fully perform the services called for under his contract in the event of a trade will subject him to discipline. I wonder what. I know that there's laid out punishments for demanding a trade publicly, but this isn't something that I'm aware of that is in the CBA. So I don't know, like, what punishments are they going to levy against
Yeah,
Lillard?
the punishment part, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's in there that they could, what's the repercussions for that in terms of what he might incur from the league, from Silver or whoever is in charge of handing that down. I don't know what that would be, but the fact that they came out and made it at least a statement, I don't know if the NBA has a clause in there that, for the good of the league. I think the NFL has something like that that's just a basically catch-all as deemed by the commissioner. This is harmful to the league. Well, if the NBA might have something like that, it says, hey, this is not in best interest. We can't have this. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was enough of some of the smaller team owners, like we talked about, I think in the last show that we did, that were unhappy about this, that maybe said, hey, Adam, this is in here. Are you gonna make this stand up or
Yeah,
not?
do
Because
something. Yeah.
there's you don't see players and stars from a lot of big market teams or warm weather. They're not asking to go to the Portlands and the Utahs and the teams like that. It's always the other way around, and that's not good for the league as a whole. It might be good for TV ratings to have LA and Boston or whatever in the finals as much as possible because of eyeballs. But you've got owners and presidents and things like that of these other teams. They're like, yeah, you know what? That's not good enough. You have to protect the rest of these teams that are already at a natural disadvantage just due to marketing dollars and sponsorships or any type of contract that a player in a larger market has that many in small markets don't. Now Dame's done really well in a small market getting some of these contracts that have nothing to do with his basketball other than he's a player. But these marketing deals, he's been great with that. But overall, most of them are, especially the bigger ones, are big market guys. I mean, Giannis and Jokic are two of the best players in the league. When have you ever seen them on much? I mean, I've seen Giannis on a little bit. Have you seen any of those guys doing many marketing things?
Well,
No,
none of the
Milwaukee and it's
Europeans though.
Denver.
None of the Europeans though. LeBron, I still think American companies love to latch on to American players. But also, I want to read you a couple of other tweets. So this is from Sam Amico, which he doesn't really have a great reputation for having legitimate information. But with that said, he tweeted out, "I keep hearing NBA would veto any Lillard trade to Heat. Don't think that's entirely true, but it's what people around the league are telling me they foresee." And then he also tweeted out, "One source said league was wildly upset about comments made by Lillard's agent to media about it being futile for teams other than Heat to try to make a trade with Blazers." I know we're kind of getting back into like the CBA and it's an extremely...
Well, it's not unprecedented because that's what David Stern did with Chris Paul.
But they owned the Hornets, though. The NBA had stepped in at that point and technically owned. We're I don't know if you say own, but we're running the Hornets. So this would be, at least as far as I can remember, unprecedented for the league to step in between two privately owned teams and say, no, you can't make this trade. So
well, and the language in the CBA, my understanding is different and more updated just to address things like this.
Yeah.
So that players, because the problem is it's not, if James Harden says he wants to go somewhere and there's a year left, okay, that's not so far out of bounds because a team might want, if they don't think he's going to come back, they might want to get something versus nothing in a year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's not Dame. Dame just signed for as much of an extension for as much money as he could possibly get and then asked out as soon as he could possibly ask out with 4 years left on his deal. Well, that's not... I mean, I suppose you can ask out, but then you can't dictate, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to sign for the most money, ask out as soon as I possibly can, and dictate where I go. It's always been understood that players obviously have preferences and they may name several teams and they really want to go to one or two of those, but they don't make it quite so public or through their minions make it quite so public. And that's really what has happened here. So I'm glad Silver did what he did. I'm not sure the effect that will actually have.
This late in the game. Yeah.
This late in the game.
It's kind of hard to say.
If he were going to go to Miami for... Well, Cronin's not going to give him up for nothing. He's like, well, it's 4 years. I mean, what? Fine, we'll sit on it until we get more, or we'll just sit on it. Period. If that's the deal now, that's not a good deal. We can probably get that later. Maybe some other teams will be interested later on. We'll try that. I don't think that the NBA, it would set a horrible precedent for a player with that many years of a contract left at that much money to depress the market to where and dictate to where so little comes back. That's a problem for the league. That's a problem for the small market teams. They would have an absolute fit. So, like I said, it's good that he did it. I'm not sure what the impact will be, but at least it was finally said.
Yeah. So the other tweet that I thought was funny, and I'm sure this just broke like an hour ago or so. So it's like, I mean, there's going to be tons of fallout from this. But the infamous Barry Jackson from Miami tweeted out, don't recall any such memo about Anthony Davis, Lakers request, or Paul George, Clippers request, or Durant, Suns request. And that's funny to me because I don't remember any one of those three players publicly coming out and having their agent stonewalling. Like, this whole thing has been has been kind of groundbreaking because no GM has ever publicly acknowledged a trade request, but I also don't remember any player having their agent and their media minions coming out and publicly like funneling them to one team.
The closest was probably Anthony Davis, but it wasn't nearly so public.
Yeah.
That's where he wanted to go, and people knew that, but you didn't have near the Haynes Fentress. This is not an isolated tweet or report. This has been the ongoing beating drum for some time now. Davis was more, it was what he wanted, but it didn't go nearly as public. And Paul George wanted to go to the Clippers. Where did he go? He went to the Thunder first.
The Clippers thing was weird because Kawhi, if I remember correctly, this was years ago. This was like, what, 4 or 5 years ago.
Paul George wanted to go to the Clippers first, then went somewhere else, and then Kawhi wanted him, and then he ended up.
He
took a little detour. He didn't go directly to where he wanted. And a lot of players have not gone to where they wanted, but it was not nearly as vociferous in the direction of one team as
this has been.
Close to Dame have reported it.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what kind of impact this will have at this point. It definitely seems like, well, I guess here's a question for you, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do you think that this was a result of the Blazers complaining to the league or other teams complaining or do you think the NBA just stepped in and nobody complained? I mean, that's what I'm kind of curious about. Was this unsolicited, or did the Blazers, kind of like the Warriors complaining about us with the GP2 trade, do you think this came from us?
Based on what came out, I don't know, a week and a half ago, where some of the teams were reportedly telling Joe, you can't do this, you can't give in to it, just, a giveaway. I would think there was a number of teams that let Silver know. I mean, it's pure guess, that let him know. And Joe was probably like, hey, this isn't right. We're if he wants to go, we'll make a good faith effort to trade him, but we're not going to do it for pennies on the dollar and all the media public pressure coming that says he's only going to go to one, won't go other places, he won't be happy or won't report or sit out, which, like I said, I thought that was BS, but that's what was said. Whether we believed it or not, that's what was said. So I think it wouldn't surprise me if that was Joe, but it also wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't just him. I think there was enough other teams that we've heard about telling, hey, Joe, you can't do this, or you need to hold out for more, that because this would set a horrible precedent going forward. And so, the reason why I think it was just Joe, I don't think Silver would have said anything. It's just one. Silver is much more beholden to, larger teams, larger markets, and a majority. I think there had to be more than, I think there had to be a decent number.
Yeah.
And it's why it probably took so long. It had to build up a little bit where Silver finally had to go, okay. If it's just Joe, there's no way that Silver's coming out and going, okay, we need to Little Portland. We're gonna try and protect them like we should. No, if I was putting money on it, there was a number of teams, and it got cacophonous enough to where he felt he needed to say something.
Well, the other thing that's funny is, okay, Barry Jackson. You listed the Anthony Davis trade. You listed the Clippers trade. You listed the Suns trade. Well, guess what? The Pelicans got a ton of assets for Anthony Davis.
Absolutely.
The Clippers gave OKC they gave them Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, that trade was great for the Thunder. And then the Suns.
Look at Brooklyn. What they got at 4 unprotected picks and 2 young wings, which is exactly what you want. They got assets and they got picks.
Yeah. Those are great trades.
Jackson's conveniently, as usual, in his homerific, and fine. I be homerific, be a fan, but just admit, hey, all right, I'm a homer for the Heat because the Heat have nothing close
to those trades.
Those trades went in terms of assets going back and forth both ways. Davis and Durant and all those were the best players, but at least the teams got back something you can go, okay, we have some good assets we can at least try and do something with. The Heat don't have that.
Yeah.
There's no SGA, there's no Bridges, there's not even a Cam Johnson.
No, not even close.
They're not even close.
The thing is, like, all the players that they're potentially offering are not even projecting. There's not even a chance that they project out to being even like a fringe star. You look at Hawkes. Hawkes is a role player at best. Maybe a starter. Maybe he plays well enough to be a starter, but he's not. He's going to be a role player. I honestly don't think Jovic is going to be a starter. I think he's a backup stretch 4 that can space the floor. Somebody made a perfect comparison. He is Ryan Anderson. He's a backup stretch 4 that doesn't play defense. So
I think he's a better passer than that, has a little more ball skills, but yes.
Yeah.
No defense, shoot. Jovic could be a little better. Now, he's not to that level now, but he has the potential of maybe getting, but that's not exactly a great player.
No, I mean, not the centerpiece of a trade.
There that he wasn't bad, and then what?
Well, so the question then is, does this memo have an impact? Like, will Dame open up his list, or does this compel other teams to put in an offer? Because the NBA levied some threats there. I don't know what those threats, what kind of stick comes with that threat. And supposedly Dame and his agent said that they would fully perform the services in their contract. But what impact does this have? Because
well, and that's the part that's going to be tough to gauge until you start hearing reports that other teams are talking about or seriously considering making offers. Because as far as we know, Miami hasn't even made an offer yet because they know they don't have anything to offer.
Yeah.
Regardless of what Barry Jackson. I mean, we talked about this. There's 29 teams that think what Miami has to offer is garbage.
Yeah.
Miami seems to think it's a king's ransom. Well, it's not. I mean, that's why nothing's been done. And that's why the Heat, there's nothing to offer because it would just be a formal offer of, here's our used leftovers. How do you like that?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it would get turned down immediately. It would set discussions off on a bad foot. You have to be, you can't be disrespectful when you're going in.
I was listening to Sam Vecini's podcast with Adam Spinella, and they ran through pretty much every single team in the league, and whether or not it was a place that would make sense for Dame. And I look at those guys, and I think that they're very unbiased. I don't think that they're definitely not coming at this from a Miami Heat vantage point. And the main issue that they were kind of bumping into is that for a lot of teams, getting Dame doesn't necessarily make sense. He's 33. They said they thought maybe he only had a couple years left of being playing at this level. I don't know. I could see at least Dame said 3 to 4 more years. I could see 3 years of Dame playing at a very high level.
A lot of it depends on the team he's on. If he's on a team where he has to carry everything and do everything, that might be shorter. If he's on a team where he's got a little more talent and especially more size, playable size, a Joel Embiid in Philly or um, some wing, Brooklyn with the wing size that they have. But I agree. There's not a lot of spots where someone like him maybe fits in, and they're going to give up. He's not going to get Durant ransom because
No.
why? Well, because Durant's 6'10", 6'11". That's why.
Yeah.
Because Paul George is 6'8". You're not going to get that because of the size of the player, not the talent of the player. This has been my thing with Dame for forever. Incredible player, but that's not the type of player, especially with his style, that leads your team to very high success. It's historical rarity. I mean, just it's so infrequent that it happens. So he can be as good as he could be. There's going to have to be other parts. He's going to have to go to a team that has other really good players and players of size and defensive players that can cover up for him. And then I think that window could be a good 3 years.
Yeah.
Maybe four. I mean, he's a really smart player. He takes care of himself really well. People say, well, he's had injuries lately. Well, he really had one that he played through for 3 years or however long. I mean, he indicated that this has been going on for a long time. And then last year, those are some bang up injuries that everyone has and plays through all the time, and they use that to, all right, we'll get you to the amount of games that is absolutely needed for you to be an all NBA player so that you qualify. And he was shut down that after that game. I mean, that was it, done.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of an injury that was. He easily could have played through that.
I think Dame has several things that are working against him that and thus not helping us. So his age, he's 30. He just turned 33. He's not a very good defensive player. He is on a pretty large contract, although looking better and better by the day because of players like Jaylen Brown.
That's insane. And I know the cap's going to keep going up, but my goodness.
So I think there's just not a lot of teams that make sense for Dame at this point in his career. I wish we would have traded him 2 years ago, but
Well, yes, but even then, you're asking him, whoever acquires him is acquiring an incredible offensive talent, a leader, a clutch player, a volume scorer, an offensively efficient guy. But if you have much talent on your team, I mean, the best place I think he could go would be Boston. He would be great in Boston.
but they're not really an option anymore. I mean,
They're not an option,
yeah,
but in terms of a place where he could go, because you've got wing size and defenders, and he would be that backcourt guy and tons of talent around him, and just go. But most teams, scoring guards. Now he's at the better end of that, but scoring guards are not hard to come by. Every team seems to have them. Some of them play better defense. And again, if he goes to a team that's in contention, which is why you would get him, they already have good players that score, and there's a bit of a hierarchy. And now you're bringing in this guy that's 32 points a game. You have to fit that in. Where is that going to fit in? A
yeah.
team like Boston will be great. A team like the Clippers, probably be incredible with the Clippers. But what do they? They don't have
They don't
anything
have
to give
anything.
you.
No. And that's
No.
why realistically the Clippers, if you're looking at teams like Philly or the Clippers, there would have to be another team involved. So they actually covered this. It was funny because I was kind of already working on it when they talked about it. But what would a trade look like between Portland, Philly, the Clippers? And I think there'd have to be a fourth team involved because you're talking about sending Dame to Philly. You're talking about sending
Harden goes to the Clippers.
Harden goes to the Clippers. Maxey. So I would try to send Maxey to like San Antonio or Brooklyn. Someplace that makes sense and has the assets. So that there is a way that you could pull something together, but it would require another team to be involved because the Clippers don't have anything. I mean, really.
And Miami. He would fit great in Miami, but they don't have a lot. Now, they've got more than the Clippers do, but it's still not.
Well, and more than Philly. More than Philly does. I mean, Philly has no picks. Yeah. So
it's the teams that could use him don't really have the assets to give up for him. Now, there are some, if you want to back it up a little bit and go, well, how would he be in Utah? Well, Utah's got stuff to give. Now, they're not a contender team, but if he went to a team like Utah, I can see that vaulting them up from where they were last year in the play-in conversation to, with the height that they have, the young talent, they could be pretty good in 1 year. That's a team where he could go and they would take I think they would take a pretty significant jump. OKC, I think he could go there, and I think he and SGA, because of SGA's size, could play off of one another. And then with all the front court guys they have, I think they could take a pretty big jump, and they have assets. But neither one of those teams are contenders now.
But neither is Brooklyn either, really. I mean, if because I know that he mentioned Mikal Bridges as being one of his friends, and that he wouldn't mind playing with him. But when you look at Brooklyn, they might even be worse off than OKC in terms
they were way under 500
after
when
the trade.
Left and Bridges and Johnson came in. They were not good. They dropped from, I think, 3 down to 6 in just a pretty short amount of time. I forget what their record was, but it wasn't very good. 400 or something. I don't remember.
They weren't very good. Then you have New York, who has a ton of picks, but if you add Dame to that team, so I think Brunson would have to go, and we don't want him, so it would have to be another situation where you have a third team taking Brunson. But if you add team to them, they're just not that good. So I know that Stephen A would love to see Dame on the Knicks, but
now we are forgetting one. He would be, and I think it's the best team. He'd be brilliant in Toronto, and have the pieces. They have the pieces that, if you put him with a more veteran team of Pascal and OG and Grant's still there, and some of the other pieces, and take the one young piece that they have, Scotty Barnes. Okay, now I don't need so many garbage picks. Scotty Barnes is a good young player. I mean, was better. It seemed like he was better his rookie year and kind of hit a wall his second year. But that's at least someone you can be talked into. It's like, all right, not only does he fit the timeline that Portland has with the younger kids, he's taller, he can defend, he can facilitate a little bit. And that's at least someone that there's some potential with. And if he goes to Toronto, that puts them right back, I think, in a championship type window. I mean, that's a good squad over there.
Yeah.
What would you have? Pirtle, Siakam, OG, Grant, and Dame. That's going to win a lot of ball games over there.
Yeah, I think they wouldn't be as good as the Heat would be with Dame and Butler and Bam, but they would still be really good. But again, that kind of depends on OG staying healthy. I think another interesting one is New Orleans, but that would require them to find a home for CJ, and I just don't. That's not us. I mean, we don't want CJ. Yeah. we don't want anything to do with CJ. So, I I don't know. That's it's just hard. I'm not sure.
Well, hopefully the statement opens it up, but you're right. I don't know how many real landing spots there are for him for teams that have the assets that would want to trade for him to where it would make a big enough difference.
Yeah, Larry, your video froze, so you're just looking off into space.
Am I?
See if maybe you can disengage and re-engage your camera or something. Um, yeah, I think there you are. There you are. There's other possibilities, right? It's like it's weird because a lot of these other reporters are coming at it from the standpoint of like, well, if Dame wants to win a championship, and it's interesting to me because that was never the bar. Whenever he spoke to the media, it was like, I want to be on a team that can compete. I want a team that has a puncher's chance. I want to be like, it was never, well, I want to be on a stacked super team. He never said that. In fact, he said the opposite. So it's weird how that's where we are now, where it's like, well, no, if it's not a super team, then it doesn't make sense. Because you put him on Oklahoma City, or you put him on the Raptors, or you put him on even Brooklyn, and he should have a chance to compete. You know, he might not be a shoe-in. He might not be a favorite, but...
Right, but if you put him on there, and it depends on what comes back, but if you've got Bridges and Johnson, and you would hope you could get maybe Claxton out of that. I don't know, what you get, but that's that's a solid team.
Yeah. Yeah, they would win games. I mean, that's better than what he's had here in a long time. So, and especially if you were to send like Nurk out in the trade, if Nurk stayed healthy, I mean, they'd have a decent squad. So I think the Blazers are trying to hold out for Dame to open up his list. And I don't know if this memo from the NBA is going to calm the nerves of teams that are potentially concerned about him holding out. Because again, that statement is, I don't know, saying that he would fulfill the commitments of his contract. Like, there's a lot of ways to do that. Harden has technically fulfilled the commitments of his contract while he was wearing a fat suit. So it's like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm happy that they did this. I think it needed to be said. Yeah.
It needed to be done. Now it's like, it should have been done a long time ago, but at least it finally got done. Now it's like, okay, if there are any other teams, maybe they can, not that they wouldn't consider it before. I don't think teams thought that Dame wouldn't show up. And, there can still be behind the scenes whisperings that aren't public. This is, public statements or talking to teams directly. Well, agents maybe don't have to be the one that says it, but there's ways of letting teams know. That's not hard to do at all.
Yeah.
So whether this is just a bit of grandstanding that doesn't have much of an effect, we don't know, but at least it was finally said.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just kind of wait and see what the fallout is. I fully expect there to be some more tweets from Dame's camp, and we'll see what comes out over the next few days. There was that weird Instagram post that Dame made a few days back where his son was wearing a Blazers hat, and it's just, this whole thing has just been so bizarre. Like, just this could have been avoided. Like, if both sides would have just come together a couple years ago and said, you know what, we're not going to be able to get this done. Like, we can't build a contender around you, Dame. We don't have the assets. And Dame's like, yep, that's cool. I totally get it. Let's just, amicably go our separate ways. That would have made all of this just so much easier. because it was obvious after that Denver series that we weren't going to be able to get it done. Like there was no silver bullet.
And the draft picks that Olshey gave away for just pieces that weren't going to make a difference. I mean, there was just, 2 for Covington, 1 for Nance, then Cronin 1 for Grant, and then the 3 that they messed up on for Collins and Caleb Swanigan. That's 7 first-round draft picks that all you have to show for that is Jeremy Grant.
Yeah.
And you still owe one.
Yeah.
You still owe one.
Yeah.
7 first-round picks. I mean, think about we're trying to get, 3 or 4. 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the franchise was put in a hole that they just didn't have the assets to move. Or once Olshey offered up that conditional pick to Nance, we had none that we could use in the future. So he misused the prior ones, tied up the future ones. There wasn't, and that's why, yes, a couple of years ago, before Dame, it's like, here's what we're going to be able to do. Here's what we're not. Are you okay with this? Or we can try and make a best deal and get you somewhere. But he went and signed that extension. And so when he signed that extension, it handcuffed everybody. Because then Dame couldn't be traded for a year. And and we got the good fortune of having the pick jump up into the top 3, and now we're not going to trade it.
Yeah.
Unless it's just an overwhelming deal and no one would give anything because they knew what the situation was. So, sure, we'll take it off your hands for Drek. Kind of like Miami was, sure, we'll for some picks in half a decade that probably aren't going to be good because our team's very well run and some players that couldn't get off the bench.
Yeah. Well, so we're at about 46 minutes right now. I wanted to completely in a separate direction, but kind of ending on a positive note. I was listening to the most recent Sean Hyken podcast. He had on a writer from Up Rock Sports, which I'm not super familiar with that site, but Robbie Callan joined him because he did an interview with Scoot before the draft, I think. But it's basically just an hour of them gushing about Scoot, and I highly recommend it. I mean, if you want to feel good and better about our future and get away from all of this Dame drama, go listen to that because I think it's impossible to not feel good when you listen to this writer, and then when he had on the other writer for The Ringer, I think it was The Ringer, that did an interview with him like a year ago. And
that one's very good.
And that one's very good. And they just gush about him. I mean, they talk about who he is as a person, as a player. This interview, they talked a lot about how the Ignite approached his development over the last year or so. They said during his first year he was kind of quiet, but by the second year he was much more vocal, that he actually has been working on being vocal on the court. And they talked about defense, and they said that he is aware of his shortcomings, but that he knows that as the leader, he has to be able to hold his teammates accountable on defense. And he's like, I can't do that if I suck at defense, basically, and
wow. And how many times has that been brought up over the years where it's tough for Dame to hold teammates accountable because he was one of the poorer defensive players on the floor.
Yeah.
The only thing that was making him seem even serviceable is if he was next to CJ or Ant. It's like, well, okay, he's not that bad. Well, the bar's low. He can't hold anyone accountable.
Yep. But we've already seen it though, because and not just defense, but they said that they were training him on how to just always be talking. As the leader of the team and the point guard, that he was actually working on just always talking on the floor and communicating with his teammates and kind of setting the tone. And it's funny because
You saw that
the interview that he was doing during the game, he kind of like, and not like in a critical way, but yelled at Shaedon to start running because Shaedon wasn't getting back on defense, and he was like, "Come on, Shay, run!" And that's the kind of thing they're talking about.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine Dame trying to say that to anyone? He
No,
can't, because
no.
Dame's the last player off the court.
Yeah. So I love his, everything I hear about him is just, it's so refreshing and exciting. And I know he's the new exciting thing about the team, but this is just such a breath of fresh air. And this is like the first time in years where I've been excited about the future of the team. I mean, really, it's just, I think Mike Richmond just did a podcast about the different phases of the Blazers over the last 10 years under Dame, and they called really the last like 3 or 4 years the dark ages, or and I'm like, well, that's what we commonly refer to as the treadmill era on our little neck of the woods, but yeah, it's just been so boring and redundant, and we haven't made any progress in years. And even though we made it to the Western Conference Finals, it was just not really anything to get super excited about. So I think the future of Scoot and Shaedon is bright, and I'm really excited to turn that page. So while I think we definitely want to hold out for the best offer that we can get for Dame, I'm ready for it to be done. Like, I'm ready for that chapter to be done.
Well, and it feels like there needs to be some closure so we can then be excited about what we have, because it is a breath of fresh air. Not that Dame was a stale air in his individual performance, but in terms of the team success, it had gotten pretty stale. And hey, we've seen that in first round sweeps just more often than not. Scoot is, I mean, obviously, has a lot to grow on, but you can tell how they did work and groom him in the G League, and how his energy is just, it's effusive. I mean, he told Shaedon to run, but anytime someone was doing something, I mean, with Rayon Rupert, I mean, he got after a guy and kind of knocked a ball loose, and then the guy got it back, and then he knocked it loose again, and you could see he was causing troubles, and Scoot was just pumping him up. He was putting the whip to the horse, like, get him, go get him, you got to take it from him. And he was screaming into his microphone that was coming down from his ear, and it was hilarious because he was completely ignoring the interview, and he was pumping his player up, and get after him, do that, get him, and the players love that, and you saw that early, even in summer camp training for summer camp. There were comments by players that came out and like, hey, he's just always talking to us. He's always encouraging us. Or who was it? Jabari Walker that came out and said it's nice to have a real point guard. Like, well, that's an interesting comment.
Yeah. So I would just say everybody should go on over and check out that recent podcast from Sean, because it's really good. It's like a little over an hour, but they're just gushing about Scoot, and it's impossible to listen to that and not come away just feeling good about our future. So I think, if something else happens, we will come back and talk about it, but we really wanted to jump on and look at this this recent development with this memo from the NBA, because this is significant. This is not something to be taken lightly.
No, and I wonder how it also changes the kind of the discourse from some of the reporters that were putting some of that stuff out there. I wonder, there won't be any mea culpas or anything like that, but it'll be interesting to see how it changes the tone of some of the things they say or have reported. Yeah.
We'll have to keep an eye on it. I think it's going to be an interesting weekend. Well, thanks again, Larry. Enjoy the coast. Happy birthday, sir. For everyone that doesn't know, it's Larry's birthday coming up. What day is your birthday, Larry?
There's a whole story to that. Not actually positive. It's today or tomorrow. One of those
One of those
perils of
days.
being adopted, and the hospital doesn't exist anymore,
Yeah.
and the stork service lost my record, whatever. So
Well, happy
we're,
birthday. Happy 39th birthday.
that's right. 39 again. This is a couple years in a
Yep.
row.
Yep. That's a good place to stop. So, all right, sir. Well, subscribe, all that fun stuff on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, thanks
Well,
for tuning in. And
so to talk to that point, I've had some friends in other countries. There's like, oh yeah, we watched it, or we don't get a lot of Blazer news down here, so you said, I mean, yeah, Mexico, Brazil, over in Europe, I know there's some people that have watched, and so that's kind of fun to hear that people checked in for stuff like that. Maybe we can get, I think, Swiss Blazer. He's over there. Maybe we can get him checking. I wonder if you can track that on here as to where people are watching from.
probably, I've never really gotten that deep into it. But we're gonna keep on making stuff. This is fun, and we're gonna keep doing it as long as we can. So, thank you for tuning in, everybody, and go Blazers.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you, sir. You too.